Let's set the scene for you in vivid detail. It's exactly 2:15 p.m. local time, right in the middle of one of the planet's most vital sea lanes that keeps global trade flowing. The sun is blazing fiercely over the Persian Gulf, and inside a naval command center, radar screens suddenly light up with activity that no one expected to see. 6 giant oil tankers, each one basically a floating city in size and scale, are slicing through the waves in a tight, synchronized group. Flanking them on both sides are 2 of China's most advanced destroyers, bristling with cutting-edge weapons and holding a steady pace of 14 knots. They're heading straight into the core of the American naval blockade the United States has been enforcing with ironclad resolve for weeks now. No one slows down. No one backs off or blinks. And for roughly 15 minutes, the entire world feels like it's holding its breath while Beijing pulls off something few nations have dared in recent years, a direct, visible challenge in one of the most sensitive spots on the map. They sailed right across the firm boundary America had set, and at first it looked like they might have gotten away with it clean. Chinese state media lit up with excited coverage, and social platforms inside China flooded with waves of patriotic pride and celebrations. In that short, intense flash of time, it genuinely felt like the long era of unchallenged American supremacy in the Strait of Hormuz was starting to crack. But precisely 30 minutes later, Washington delivered a powerful reply. What happened next unfolded so quickly, so accurately, and with such overwhelming force that it sent ripples of surprise all the way from Beijing to Moscow, Tehran, and well beyond. In under 20 minutes, the United States completely dismantled China's brief moment of apparent victory and turned the whole thing into a textbook example that naval strategists and war colleges will study for decades to come. This wasn't just a military exchange. It was a stark reminder of how great power rivalries can play out in real time with global stakes. Stay right here with me, because over the next few minutes I'm going to walk you through every key detail of what unfolded, minute by minute, decision by decision, and action by action, so you can see exactly how it all played out and what it truly means. To really appreciate why this showdown carries such huge weight, we need to zoom out and examine the broader context that led up to it. For several weeks beforehand, the United States had been maintaining a very tight naval blockade across the Strait of Hormuz as a direct answer to rising tensions with Iran. They enforced it with serious determination, every single vessel trying to enter or exit. Iranian waters got stopped, thoroughly inspected, and often turned away completely. Washington's position was crystal clear from the start. No sanctioned cargo, no unauthorized support. Nothing gets through this critical choke point without explicit American approval. And that matters enormously, because the strait moves about 20% of the world's daily oil supply, making it prime ocean real estate that sends a loud message to every energy-hungry nation on the planet. China, however, took a sharply different public line. Beijing repeatedly called the American blockade illegal under international maritime rules and totally unacceptable for their core national interests. In both private talks and open statements, Chinese diplomats warned that any effort to block their tankers would count as a direct threat to China's energy security. When you pause and really think about that language, it hits hard. For a country that imports more than 70% of its oil through this exact stretch of water, energy security isn't some abstract diplomatic phrase. It's an existential issue tied to economic stability and everyday life for hundreds of millions of people. Beijing wasn't bluffing or posturing. They were deliberately laying the foundation for exactly the bold step they took that afternoon. Intelligence reports had already flagged that China was gearing up for a very public, very direct pushback against the blockade. The convoy that popped up on those radar screens wasn't some accidental misstep or spur-of-the-moment idea. It was a carefully planned strategic play, commercially flagged supertankers, escorted by active military vessels, threading through the world's strictest naval exclusion zone. In essence, Beijing was forcing a very public test of American willpower right in front of every intelligence service and news camera on Earth. They were openly asking whether Washington still had the resolve to back up its red lines when the ships on the other side flew the Chinese flag. That kind of question had never been posed so bluntly, so publicly, or in such a loaded strategic location before. Earlier frictions between the two powers had unfolded in the South China Sea or around Taiwan, but never so openly in waters long viewed as firmly under American maritime influence. Everyone watching understood this was something entirely new. The convoy itself made for an impressive and intimidating sight. 6 very large crude carriers, each loaded with over 2 million barrels of oil, moved in tight, disciplined formation. Protecting them were 2 Type 052D destroyers, serious modern naval hardware armed with YJ-18 anti-ship missiles, HQ-9B surface-to-air systems, and 130 mm naval guns. This was no polite civilian request for passage. It was a deliberate blend of commercial operations wrapped in a clear show of military strength. At 2:05 p.m. local time, the lead Chinese destroyer sent a calm but unambiguous message over international maritime channels. It declared that the Chinese Navy was simply conducting routine commercial escort duties, and that any interference would be treated as a hostile act against the People's Republic of China. Then the ships pressed onward, without deviation or hesitation, straight ahead at 14 knots. For the next 15 minutes, they pushed deeper into the American exclusion zone, while the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group remained visible on radar. American warships were nearby, yet the Chinese formation never wavered by even a single degree. Chinese state television jumped into live coverage almost immediately, with commentators proudly declaring that the myth of American dominance in the Strait of Hormuz was being shattered. Hashtags celebrating the breakthrough shot to the top of trends inside China within minutes. What struck me most while following it all live was the remarkable discipline shown by the Chinese commander. No emergency maneuvers, no frantic radio negotiations, no visible doubt whatsoever. The convoy simply advanced as if the blockade didn't exist and the American ships were just background scenery. This was psychological warfare at an elite level. Beijing was betting heavily that Washington wouldn't risk firing on Chinese-flagged vessels in international waters. By 2:20 p.m., the convoy had successfully cleared the narrowest section of the strait. Chinese officials quickly released statements praising the bravery of their navy, and many analysts at the time concluded that Beijing had just pulled off a decisive strategic win by calling America's bluff cleanly. But here's what those observers didn't fully grasp in the moment. When a rising power openly contests the established order on the seas, the established power rarely takes long to craft its answer. The real question was never whether America would respond, but how forcefully, how rapidly, and how visibly. And we were all about to see that answer in stunning clarity. At 2:23 p.m., just 3 minutes after the Chinese convoy cleared that narrowest point, the atmosphere inside the U.S. Navy Operations Center shifted dramatically. The Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group moved to heightened alert status. The USS Dewey, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer positioned closest to the formation, increased speed, and began closing the distance fast. Moments later, 4 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters launched from the carrier deck, their afterburners cutting sharply through the clear afternoon sky. What made the American response stand out so sharply from the Chinese approach was its quiet precision, no dramatic radio threats, no press releases timed for cameras, no public warnings designed to play on the news. Instead, the U.S. Navy simply executed a pre-planned escalation protocol that had clearly been rehearsed in detail for precisely this kind of scenario. It was cold, calculated, and highly efficient. This was the moment the entire dynamic began to reverse. Before we dive deeper into the specifics of that decisive American counter, it's worth pausing to recognize something important. Events like these are developing faster and carrying heavier consequences than most people realize, and staying truly informed has never been more essential in our interconnected world. If you want to stay ahead of the biggest military and geopolitical shifts as they happen, then subscribing to Political Insight Live right now is one of the smartest moves you can make. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and you'll never miss a beat when the next major story breaks. Every day, we bring you serious, well-researched analysis on the developments shaping our global future. Now let's return to those critical minutes unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz. By 2:35 p.m., the USS Dewey had closed to less than 4,000 yards from the rearmost Chinese tanker. Its SPY-1 radar had locked onto every vessel in the group, and every weapon system aboard was fully activated. 2 American P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft had taken up positions overhead, feeding real-time targeting data down to the surface ships. 4 F-35s circled high at 30,000 feet. Largely invisible to most Chinese shipboard sensors, the contrast between the two sides at that moment was telling. China had made its bold statement through daring movement and immediate public messaging. America was building its response around silent, overwhelming technical superiority and flawless operational execution. No leaks, no briefings, just pure efficiency happening in real time. 3 additional Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the USS Stockdale, USS Gridley, and USS Sampson, maneuvered into intercept positions, forming a textbook box around the Chinese convoy. These ships didn't simply approach. They carried out high-speed flanking maneuvers that sealed off any realistic chance of the Chinese vessels turning back toward Iranian waters. Every step was coordinated through encrypted satellite links and secure data bursts. The Chinese commanders could see some American warships closing on their radar, but they had almost no visibility into the full scope of the operations surrounding them. That kind of information asymmetry itself becomes a powerful weapon, and the U.S. Navy was wielding it with clear intent. 2 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters lifted off from destroyer decks and flew low over the water to minimize early detection. Their goal was to prepare for potential visit, board, search, and seizure if things escalated further. Special boarding teams from the 5th Fleet's maritime security detachments were already geared up, briefed, and standing ready. From Diego Garcia, roughly 2,500 miles away, 2 B-52 strategic bombers were placed on immediate alert, ready to provide long-range support within hours if needed. Submarine assets in the region also began repositioning quietly, their movements invisible to outside eyes. In under 25 minutes, the United States had secured complete tactical dominance across air, surface, electronic, and underwater domains all at once. The pressure was tightening fast while the Chinese ships continued forward. At precisely 2:49 p.m., the United States Navy delivered its clear response. Without any final public warning, The USS Dewey fired a single 5-inch Mark 45 naval gun round. The shell traveled with pinpoint accuracy and struck the engine room of the trailing Chinese destroyer. 2 more rounds followed within seconds. The explosions were controlled yet highly effective, knocking out propulsion systems and sending black smoke pouring from the stern. The important point here is that American gunners weren't aiming to sink the ship. They were methodically disabling it in a surgical way. This wasn't reckless aggression. It was a calibrated demonstration of precision and restraint, designed to achieve maximum effect while keeping the risk of full-scale escalation low. Within 90 seconds of those initial shots, the disabled Chinese destroyer lost all forward momentum and began drifting with the current. That became the signal. The 2 MH-60R Seahawks, positioned just beyond visual range, surged forward immediately. They came in low and fast, hovering directly above the disabled vessel. Ropes dropped, and in less than 25 seconds, 16 U.S. Navy SEALs and Marines fast-roped onto the deck in full combat gear. The speed and coordination of that boarding were breathtaking. On the remaining Chinese ships, close-ins weapon systems activated, but never opened fire. Almost certainly because their commanders realized that engaging at that point would trigger an overwhelming reaction from the entire nearby carrier strike group. The 2 intact Chinese destroyers tried sharp course changes to create distance, but American F-35s swept in low to make their presence unmistakably clear on radar and through portholes alike. Within 8 minutes, the boarded destroyer was fully under American control, and the stars and stripes were raised on its stern. The 6 oil tankers, now isolated and without protection, received immediate orders to stop engines. 4 complied within minutes, and the rest followed soon after. In under 15 minutes, China's bold 15-minute advance had been entirely reversed, and then some. The United States hadn't just halted the convoy. It had publicly seized one of China's most advanced destroyers in international waters. That striking image of an American flag flying from a Chinese warship in the Strait of Hormuz is one that will appear in news reports, policy papers, and military briefings for a long time to come. The strategic lessons from those decisive 15 minutes go far beyond the strait itself. While China now boasts the world's largest navy by hull count, projecting real power thousands of miles from home bases remains a far tougher challenge, with limited replenishment options, constrained air cover, and supply lines that are highly vulnerable. This confrontation laid those limitations bare in a very public and painful way. Near its own coastline, the People's Liberation Army Navy would be a formidable adversary for anyone. But here in America's traditional sphere of influence, the capability gap stayed wide, thanks to decades of combat experience, integrated intelligence networks, and a network of regional allies with forward bases. The economic ripple effects hit fast and hard. The brief disruption sparked a 9% spike in global oil prices within the first hour of the news breaking, sending immediate shocks through Asian markets. For China, which relies so heavily on this corridor for the vast majority of its imported energy, the setback carries long-term costs that go well beyond losing one warship. Beijing now faces tough questions about whether public challenges to freedom of navigation in this theater are worth the combined risks of military embarrassment, higher energy prices for its citizens, and eroded diplomatic standing. Politically, the episode puts real pressure on Chinese leadership. The nationalist voices that celebrated the initial crossing are now confronting some uncomfortable realities. How do you reconcile that brief pride in breaking through with the lasting image of an American flag on one of your own military vessels? That's a tough narrative to spin, and Beijing's communications teams know it. Looking back historically, this event echoes one of the most decisive single-day naval actions in modern times. Back in 1988, during Operation Praying Mantis, the United States neutralized half of Iran's naval fleet in a single afternoon after repeated provocations in these same waters. The pattern today followed a similar script: bold provocation met with swift, overwhelming, and highly visible response that delivered an unambiguous message to every nation watching. The key difference this time is the opponent, not a regional player testing patience, but America's most serious global rival mounting a deliberate challenge in one of the world's most critical waterways. The speed and clarity of the American response will likely force planners in Beijing to rethink basic assumptions about power projection far beyond their first island chain. In the weeks ahead, the situation could turn genuinely pivotal. China might counter through cyber means, stepped-up activity in the Taiwan Strait, or faster naval moves in the Indian Ocean. Or Beijing could opt for a lower-profile shift, easing direct naval tests in the Middle East while advancing influence through economic deals and quieter diplomacy. For Washington, the outcome reinforces the value of keeping carrier strike groups forward deployed and ready at key global choke points. Yet it also serves as a sober reminder that as China's Navy improves year after year, clear windows of American advantage like this one won't stay open indefinitely. The gap is narrowing. That's simply the reality of great power competition in 2026. This isn't abstract theory for think tanks anymore. It's unfolding live, with live ammunition and real economic fallout. Nations across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East are poring over every detail, recalibrating alliances and defense strategies based on what they just saw. One chapter of unchallenged American dominance in these waters is being tested, and a more complex era is taking shape. But at least for today, the message came through loud and clear. Challenging American control of the Strait of Hormuz still carries an immediate, overwhelming, and very public cost. This confrontation won't be the final word in the story between these two powers. It may not even be the most significant one, but it stands as a defining moment in their broader rivalry. Grasping what each side did, why they did it, what it cost, and what it revealed is crucial for anyone trying to understand where our world is headed next. The next move now rests with Beijing, and the whole planet is watching closely to see what they choose. Don't miss any updates as this continues to develop. If you value sharp, serious analysis on stories like this, subscribe to Political Insight Live today. Turn on your notifications and drop your thoughts in the comments below. How do you see China responding in the next 48 hours? Will they escalate, step back, or try a completely different approach? Your views matter, and the discussion is already heating up down there. Thanks for watching Political Insight Live, and stay tuned because the next chapter is already unfolding.